Hi, everyone. So happy to have you join us on this wonderful Financial Inclusion Week. Wanted to thank all the folks at Acción and Center for Financial Inclusion for organizing. We're going to get right into this topic as we only have a half hour for something that I think me and Anna Maria could probably spend weeks, days talking about. And we're so excited that this is also a very specific feature of Financial Inclusion Week. I think now more than ever, with the state of the world and what's going on, understanding the issues that specifically face refugees, specifically around financial inclusion, but more generally could not be more important now than ever. My name's Barry Shorey. I'm work at the Hilton Foundation, the Conrad Hilton Foundation, running the Refugee Initiative and the Disasters Program. And I'm so privileged to be able to support and resource and cheerlead Ana Maria Diaz, who's the president of the Coalition for Venezuela. And we're going to get right into it. So instead of me trying to introduce Ana Maria and her incredible career and life, Ana Maria, I'm going to turn it over to you and just ask you to tell a little bit about yourself, but also share what are the priorities of the coalition now? What are you working on around refugee and migrant inclusion? How are you specifically supporting Venezuelans? Just sort of giving us an overview of yourself and the wonderful organization you work with.
Thank you so much, Barry. And as you were saying, my name is Ana Maria Diaz, and I am the president of Coalición por Venezuela, which is the biggest NGO networks led by migrants and refugees, Venezuelans, in 23 countries. And I am a lawyer, a Venezuelan lawyer, now forcibly displaced in Spain, and I am part of the 8 million Venezuelans forcibly displaced in the world. And to answer your question, well, our absolute priority in Coalición por Venezuela is to promote access to rights for migrants and refugees from Venezuela. And I know this might sound a bit broad, but taking into consideration that we are 8 million persons around the world, and we are not fully recognized as refugees, and added to that, we face gigantic challenges by not having documentations, proper passports. I mean, the Venezuelan passport is the most expensive in the world, and it's not easily for us to get it. But also we have children that are now stateless children in their host communities. We don't have, in many countries, suitable documentations, processes, and with the slow and impractical regularization processes, we're talking about several levels of barriers on top of several levels of vulnerabilities. But I don't want to spend much time in the barriers. And the fact is that something wonderful happened 6 years ago. And what happened is that so many people, amazing people that were forcibly displaced in this humanitarian crisis from Venezuela, when it wasn't at the highest peak, so many of them, after they crossed the borders and without having their needs covered, many of them become community leaders and put their hands to help other Venezuelans that came behind them to make their arrival easier. And eventually, many of those community leaders united under this coalition. And we started to work as a network to promote, share knowledge and good practices. And to the fact is that right now, we all are working in regularization processes, in social economic inclusion and development of host communities, reducing xenophobia, and that, we all support our diaspora, but also other nationalities in the Latin America and the Caribbean region.
Great, thanks for that overview. I think I'm always struck by the 23 countries and the 8 million Venezuelans, and the fact this sort of grassroots organization that you guys have done to form this coalition to make sure that refugees have a voice, and the vulnerabilities over the barriers, and sort of really identifying a space where you guys can all sort of talk and share lessons learned. It's been incredible seeing the sort of progression of the coalition. I want to talk, since a lot of folks on the line are obviously here really interested in sort of the financial inclusion aspects of the world. I'd be really curious just to hear a little bit about the specific policy barriers to refugee and migrant inclusion, labor market and financial in the region. I mean, you can even talk about specific countries if it's easier. And then sort of what are some of the changes and things you're advocating for at either national or regional levels to help remove some of those barriers to labor market? Or like you mentioned, there are so many barriers, but I think honing in specifically for this audience, it'd be great to just hear a little bit about the barriers and a little bit about what things you want to see happen at regional and national level.
Okay. Well, that's a very good question, because both in the policies as well as in the practice, the biggest challenge that we are facing right now is about integration. I mean, in recently years, the Latin America region made huge efforts for the biggest crisis in the last 50 years that we have in history in the region, and many of the efforts focused on the humanitarian assistance, which it was extremely necessary. But, however, there wasn't allocated enough funds or interventions with a triple nexus approach or integration or development approach that would allow us 5 years later to be talking about integration, effective integration. So, for example, we see constant movements through the Darien jungle, which is between the Panama and the Colombian jungle, which is one of the most dangerous illegal crossings in the world. And believe me, I've been there. That's a horrible place. And I could see entire families crossing that has already been in places like Chile, Peru, Colombia. And unfortunately, they didn't manage to overcome the integration barriers. And they have to cross towards the north, and we can see now crossing the north of Mexico, trying to pursue the American dream. So there is still pending this conversation to have about integration, because this is a crisis that has not stopped, but certainly it changed its way. It is a crisis about integration. And getting into the detail, the ceilings that are placed in about opportunities for proper dignifying employees for migrants and refugees. What access? How can highly trained, highly prepared Venezuelans can be fully integrated into the host countries? Are the regularization processes constant, accessible? Because in practice, a person will not stay in a country without documents, waiting for 1 to 3 years to have an ID that allows them to work or to have to open up a bank account. So in the fact, no one will pay $3,000 for getting an ID and to work and to promote the development of that country. So there must be friendly, accessible, approachable regularization processes, because at the end, the only thing that we are looking for Venezuelans is a place to set roots, and people that is fully regularized, it's integrated, and eventually it's a people that it's developing the country, the host country.
Yeah, I think you made an important point. 2 important points I just want to highlight is, one, this transition from humanitarian to sort of inclusion integration. And I hear this so much from the partners we work with, of especially in the Latin America crisis, is there was a lot of attention when the Venezuelans first started moving, and these humanitarian responses that were 6 months, cash delivery, whatever else. And then that was it. And so how are you supposed to sort of look at the longer term and recognize no one's going back anytime soon? We know that from other refugee crises. And so how can donors, funders, policymakers, people shift the mindset and really think from the beginning, what is multi-year funding? What do multi-year policies look like? I think that's hugely important. And then the other piece you mentioned, which I just want to highlight around, there's a difference between policy and what's in the books and practice. And I saw this a ton in the Middle East around the Syrian refugee crisis. So in theory, Syrians in Jordan could access work permits. But to do that, it was a 12-step process, which included going to a police station to register your ID. And so what Syrian refugee is interested in walking to a police station in the hopes that they could access a permit? And I think that, again, from policy or what's on the books to practice is a huge gap. So you could have the best regularization processes in the world, but if refugees don't have information, if they don't have access to funds and it's too expensive, right? Like that is just a huge thing that I don't think people recognize. And I've seen some incredible work in Colombia around that. Yeah, go ahead, Ana Maria.
Actually, you pointed out something very, very specific, which is the similarities that we all have found between the Syrian crisis and the Venezuelan crisis, and how with the time has been normalized a crisis that is still going on. And this is happening in Latin America region with the Venezuelan crisis, because there is a sense that everything is normal. Now we can start to discussing any other issues, but in the practice, there are still so many barriers, and the crisis is still present.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point. And it's so hard, right? One crisis to another. If we think about, what is going on in Gaza and Israel and the sort of refugee crisis, that's eventually going to create, it's like from one crisis to another. And so just thinking about, I think that's why that long-term strategies have to come in mind. I think it'd be really great to hear your perspective a little bit on, which I don't think everyone not in the refugee space really realizes, but can you talk a little bit about the positive economic impacts refugees and migrants can have on their communities? You talked about, listen, unless you sort of get documentation, you can't contribute back to the place where you're settling in, and often you look for better opportunities. But what sort of impacts have you seen around economic impacts or things like that? And then do you have any examples from some of your partners or the countries that you work in of like, what are some good approaches you've seen to try and sort of hone that economic impact of refugees or really integrate economically? I'll give one anecdote. I think it's that I always find so interesting. I've been privileged to work on a few economic projects across refugee spaces, and had one project in East Africa where we did a loan guarantee for refugees and saw like a 98% repayment rate, right? Refugees repaying at higher rates than host communities. And I just keep finding that data over and over again. So just curious to hear, especially in the Latin America context, like what you're seeing.
Well, I have seen many, many good examples, because especially we in Coalición are focusing for this 2 years approach, specifically in social economic inclusion and sustainability of the NGOs. So this is something that we are already working around. So absolutely, there is many specialists in the area that have shown with strong data. This is not a personal opinion or of a refugee-led organization opinion. It is strong data behind this. The Inter-American Development Bank, the World Bank, the UNDP, several other agencies from the UN system. All of them have shown how effectively is to integrate migrants and refugees into the host countries. And what does it mean in numbers? Well, this could implies a growth in the GDP of the countries between 2 to 4.5%. And with Latin America and the Caribbean as a region with many challenges, with still pending issues with our host communities, this is a huge plus. And the Venezuelan diaspora particularly has medium and high levels of professionalizations. So we found these amazing engineers, amazing doctors and lawyers and people with highly training and high skills, but they cannot even reach a single job as in an office or delivering food. This has a huge impact for us and for the host communities. So in that sense, the gap is how to integrate professionals and qualify, uh, you know, um, people into the labor market, into the national labor market. And in the practice, I have found that we can achieve better solutions and tangible changes with the municipalities instead of the instead of the countries, because I have lost a whole year trying to conversations after conversations at the highest level, and in the fact that the municipalities say, look, I have another challenges, I cannot wait, I have uh, thousands of Venezuelans here, and how can I solve this? Okay, let's get to work together. And I have three good examples on how this works in the practice from Coalición. One is from the very, very south, which is Argentina. The Association of Venezuelan Nurses, which is called ASONVEAR, in the middle of the COVID crisis, they found a flaw in the system, in the law, in the national law, that allows them to revalidate their professional degrees more easily, and at the same time, they found this, and they advocate with the municipalities and the federal governments, and they insisted in, please let us work. This is a validation from the law, and they did it, and they achieved. This is incredible. The validation of more of 1,000 Venezuelan doctors and 800 nurses in 5 years. And all of them today are working in the Argentinian health system, which has great challenges and great needed. And they actually contribute to the public health system. This is amazing. And it's about advocating, about, allow people to be integrated and to put in practice their knowledge. Another good example that we have, it's from Peru, and as many of you may know or may not know, Lima, the capital city from Peru, hosts the incredible amount of almost the size of one state within Venezuela. It is the capital with the most amount of number of Venezuelans living there, and there with not very good environment. There is the initiative Valiosos from Veneactiva, and this initiative has managed to connect Venezuelan specialized talent with the Peruvians companies or Peruvian projects, and place Venezuelans in formal and decent jobs. And I know that this might sound easy when we say it, but in the reality, when we have a very restrictive employment policies and with high xenophobia and competition with the host communities needs and the migrants and refugees needs, it is a quite hostile environment. And achieving this, it's amazing. And the third example is from North America, which is Venezolanas in Tech. It is a group of amazing Venezuelan women that in the areas of technology went from being 3 girls in New York City to a group of plus 1,000 leaders, which how they call around the world, which in an incredible effort to close the tech gender gap and support Venezuelans immigrants to give them mentoring, employment opportunities, and basics in areas like web programming and web design for Venezuelans women and even girls inside Venezuela. And of course, all over the world, our full-time job in Coalición is to advocate at the local, national, regional, and a global level for more accessible policies and allow us to contribute to those policies.
Awesome examples of economic inclusion. I thought you were going to give one more, or one of the examples was going to be, but I'll highlight them because I can never talk about them enough. But just to make your point about, I think also on our side, we've found that municipality level is really where the problem solving happens. Partially because, like you said, in Lima, right, an entire state, the size of the state of Venezuela is there. And if the national governments and regional governments aren't helping, it's up to the cities to roll up their sleeves. And I've seen that time and time again. So the city I would thought you were going to highlight, but maybe they get highlighted enough, but I'll do it here, is Barranquilla in Colombia, another master city that has created a sort of center of economic inclusion for refugees, among also a sort of reception center where people, all Venezuelans and other refugees and migrants and even Colombians themselves can learn about how to access different services, public services. And then there's a sort of double click of that center specifically on jobs, and looking at how to match jobs, how to access business loans and business skills and things like that. And I mean, you've seen Barranquilla, even they needed larger spaces for the offices to receive the refugees and migrants. And I think it's such a good example of how much that the mayor and the mayor's team and what leadership does to matter, and how their words all along have also been about, listen, like, these are our brothers and sisters. It is incumbent upon us to integrate. It will be better for the city all around if people have access to bank accounts, if people have access to jobs. So yeah, just a shout out to Barranquilla, but I know they already get a lot of attention.
No, you are absolutely right. At the Barranquilla, Medellin, even Bogota, the capital city, they all have incredible, social economic inclusion. For actually in Bogota, I was recently in Bogota, and they have this name for us. They don't call us migrants or refugees; they call us new Bogotans, which is great. It talks about inclusion, but not as a name tag, but real inclusion supported. And Colombia has the highest rate of informal jobs.
Yep.
So yeah, absolutely. I wanted to highlight the other success cases, because everyone talks about Colombia, how well they have done it. But yeah, there is so many histories that we will need a whole week to talk about it.
I'm also biased because we work in Colombia, so that's where my examples are, which is why I agree with you. I'm glad you didn't actually show all the Colombian examples. So the other in our sort of little bit left, this is, like we said, this was going to be way too short. In our little bit left, I think there's a lot of hype these days, for good reason, and it's a word that I wish we had a better word for, but sort of localization, this localization piece, this idea that sort of the solutions and the representation and the voice should come closest to the populations themselves, right? And so who better to speak about refugee issues than refugees themselves? Who better to problem solve refugee inclusion than refugees and host communities themselves? And no longer, is it okay for giant white women like me to come in and tell you all what to do, or giant INGOs? And I think your coalition is such a good example of building up a mass of support. You often say the mantra, which we talk about all the time, nothing about us without us, which we in Hilton, we have a sort of big tag on our offices that remind us that when we find ourselves talking about refugees without refugees. So I just want to, with the Global Refugee Forum coming up so soon in December, there's going to be a big emphasis around economic integration, financial inclusion. What's the coalition doing to make sure that refugees and migrants have a seat at the right tables? And not just a seat, but have active participation and not just consultation, but like real work. So what's your sort of strategies and what are you guys doing around the nothing about us without us frame?
Yeah, that's our mantra. You said it right. That's our mantra. And nothing about us without us. It's about including migrants and refugees at all stages mean, we're talking about consultation, formulation, implementation processes of these public policies that directly affect to us. So, well, in this context, in Coalición, we understand our role as a organized civil society, and that is how can we facilitate, promote these processes, including the key of the active advocacy. We recently had our General Assembly, which is the most important event for us in Coalición of the year. Once a year, we're trying to gather in one single place to find these shared solutions around it. And the topic for this year was integration and sustainability. And we spent three days working with academia, with the UN agencies, with international cooperation, largest NGOs, other NGOs from different nationalities and private sector. And the main aspect is, of course, this requires long breath, but also professionalization. And in our organizations, and this is mainly Coalición, we are raising the level and preparing our community leaders for these processes. We have just graduated the first cohort of the Latin America and the Caribbean region of the Refugee Scale-Up program with 40 leaders, and they all are the national country coordinators and deputy country coordinators in Coalición in these 23 countries that will cascade these trainings for the community leaders within the countries. And we had preparation in basics of diplomacy and strategic communications, negotiation skills, human rights systems, how to be effective advocates in our host communities at the local level, at a national level, regional level. And this will include a good action at all levels that we are expecting to generate those challenges that allow the inclusion and the growth of all. And of course, well, you will be seeing us and in many and those many community leaders sitting at the table, talking with their municipalities, with the governments, and with academia, with private sector, talking about these issues and proposing effective solutions throughout all of the region. And I do want to thank the Conrad Hilton Foundation for believing in the power of people as change makers, because the Refugee Scale-Up program was possible thanks to the Hilton Foundation support. And we will be in the Global Refugee Forum as well, advocating at the highest level, trying to see those changes happening. And once more, thank you so much for the support and for making this possible.
You guys are doing all the hard work, but it's a pleasure. There's a quick question. We have 3 minutes left, and then I want to make sure I give you the last words to close. So there's a quick question around, which I think is super interesting. As a lawyer, I'm sure you are a data nerd as well. So would love to hear your thoughts just on data portability and whether data protection and data can help empower refugees, right? Like, so how are some of the ways you guys are using data or IDs or things like that? Any comments you have on that? And then just, Anna Maria, I want to give you the floor to close out too with that as well.
Well, data it's so important for us because and this is the revelation for this session, I will say, but we are preparing this very technical paper with the data gathered by our local NGOs, how to measure the inclusion of the countries, but at the municipality level, at a city level. How well is the cities being, developing this transition to humanitarian, to integration, to documentation, to regularization processes? And this is all sustain in the data of our NGOs, but as well, documentation is a big issue for us because as Venezuelans, it is very hard to have access for a document, an ID, a passport. It is I mentioned it before, it is the most expensive in the world, but also we don't have many embassies to reach out, and the process it's not very friendly. So this is something that we are working on. We have an amazing NGO, which is called Save My Identity, and they are working in a very nice solution, which is a digital ID for refugees or for stateless people, but it's based on the blockchain technology, which is amazing for protection, that will allow people to access an ID even if they lost their physical passport. This is one of the many proposals that we have that are amazing solutions, not just for the Venezuelan case, but so many people in the world. And just closing remarks. Thank you so much, Barry. Thank you so much to the Center of Financial Inclusion for making this little space possible for us to talk and to share the good experiences from Latin America and the Caribbean, and from Coalición por Venezuela.
And just to emphasize, guys, if you have further questions, reach out to Ana Maria, find the Coalition for Venezuela, support them, the incredible work they're doing, and nothing about us without us, right, Ana Maria? Thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you, Ana Maria. Bye.